Hello, and welcome to Books on Tap Live. I'm Stacy Gill from PW, and today we have a special guest host, Tony Daniel, Senior Editor at Bane Books. He is quite possibly the most knowledgeable person alive on the works of our guest, New York Times bestselling author Larry Correia, who will be talking to us today about his new epic fantasy, Destroyer of Worlds. But before that, I'd like to mention this event is sponsored by Bane Books, and we are giving away a limited number of copies of Destroyer of Worlds. You can enter to win by going to publishersweekly.com/Correia, that's Correia, and we've dropped the link to the page in the comments section on Facebook and YouTube to make it a little easier. And don't forget, during the live event, audience members can ask questions by typing them in on Facebook comments and YouTube, and we will try to get to as many as possible after the interview. One last thing, to get notifications of future events, sign up at publishersweekly.com/booksontap-live. And now, Tony, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. I want to welcome Larry Correia and thank him for being with us. Hey, Larry, and talk a little bit about Larry before we get going. Larry Correia is the creator of the Wall Street Journal and New York Times bestselling Monster Hunter International series. That series, the first entry is Monster Hunter International. That's a big one for Larry. He's also the author of urban fantasy hardboiled adventure saga, The Grimnoir Chronicles, which is a personal favorite of mine. And he's the creator of the novel and series we're here to talk about right now. It's called The Saga of the Forgotten Warrior, with the first entry being Son of the Black Sword, followed by House of Assassins. And now out in hardcover is Destroyer of Worlds, the third book in the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior. Larry lives in Utah with his wife and family. Well, first of all, Larry, we can talk about this book, which is just a beautiful physical object, isn't it? It's got this great Kurt Miller cover. Look at that back. Isn't that cool? That is so cool.
Yeah, Kurt's a super talented artist, and I know he's actually he won some awards off the last one for his work. So hopefully he keeps that up.
It's also got a map because it's a epic fantasy by Patrick.
Isaac Stewart. Yeah, Isaac Stewart's actually he actually has done a lot of maps for Brandon Sanderson. That's how I first saw his work. And when I finally got to write an epic fantasy, I had to have a big map.
So this is what you'll get if you get that signed, and Larry's beautiful monster scary signature that he does in all of his signed copies. So that's a really cool thing to get. Well, and it's got this great Jim Butcher quote on the cover too, which says, "Everything I like in fantasy," says Jim Butcher.
Well, Jim's a friend of mine. I think he's one of the most talented authors alive. And so when it turned out he loved this book, I totally chased him down for a cover quote.
That's very cool. Well, all right. So this is epic fantasy. You were previously, you kind of broke in writing the Monster Hunter series, but have you always wanted to do this? And how did the world take shape in your mind as you were thinking about this?
Well, it's actually kind of cool. I grew up on, I started out reading Westerns because I grew up in an environment where reading wasn't appreciated, but my dad thought Westerns were manly, so Westerns were okay. And then I discovered my gateway to fantasy was actually Terry Brooks' Sword of Shannara. And I love that. And from there, I started reading everything hands on. Read David Eddings, Ray Feist, Tolkien, obviously. And so I read a lot of epic fantasy growing up. And then later as an adult, when I was actually trying my hand at writing, the very first thing I was successful at was urban fantasy. And then I went on and I did alternate history and I did thrillers and wrote 20 other books first. But epic fantasy was always a genre that I loved, and I'd grown up with it. So what happened is I was actually working on the novel Monster Hunter Alpha, which is an urban fantasy werewolf novel set in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And I write to musical soundtracks, and the musical soundtrack I was writing Alpha to was Hans Zimmer's Inception. And I had not seen the movie Inception yet, but the soundtrack's awesome. And there's a song called "Waiting for a Train" that was so cool and so evocative that I actually stopped what I was doing and wrote a scene specifically set to the music of that song, and just kind of out of nowhere. And that scene turned into the knife fight scene from Son of the Black Sword, which is the first book in this series. And I kind of built the world from there just because of the short story I did. It required a world with caste systems, real stringent caste systems. And so I looked to India for ideas. And I drew a lot of the culture from this, from ancient India. Except it's not on Earth. It's a fantasy world. Um, really had a lot of fun with that. Son of Black Sword was the first novel I wrote that actually had really extremely good critical acclaim. I've always been popular and I've always done really well. So I started getting really good critical reviews for Son of the Black Sword because it was a little more serious, darker and serious work. So I actually thought it was a trick. I didn't know I was getting good reviews. But yeah, that's where it came from originally. And so I created the world of Locke. Like I said, loosely based on India. It's a society with really serious, hardcore caste systems. Basically, every man has a place. However, it's not religious in nature, and this world has actually banned religion. Religion is completely illegal. And so our main character is actually basically a magical law enforcement agent, and part of his job is stamping out any of the old religious beliefs that are still around. And in fact, they've kind of replaced religion with this all-consuming law. There's a capital city that administers basically everything, and it's got its fingers into all aspects of life. And so our main character is one of their enforcers. Forgive me, I have a cold, so.
So yeah, all right. So Locke is before we get to the main character, talk a little bit more about the magic system, which is cool as all get out. You have the black steel, and you have water being really scary and bad and full of demons. And just talk about that a little bit. I just love this whole conception.
Well, okay, so in this world, basically, the people of this world, they all live on one continent that is completely surrounded, and they never ever go to the sea. Because in this world, the ocean is basically hell. 1,000 years ago, there was what's referred to as the reign of demons, where demons fell from the sky, and they were on land and sea, but mankind fought that. Mankind was almost exterminated, but we won eventually and shoved the demons back in the ocean. Since that time, demons have lived in the water, and mankind has lived on dry ground. And should either one trespass, they're basically doomed. And the magic system, there's a couple sources of magic in this world. There's what's referred to as demon hide, or anything that comes from demon bodies is actually infused with a magical essence that people can use. So it is actually a renewable resource, only to get it, you have to take it from a demon, and they're super deadly. And then the other source of magic is what's referred to as black steel, which is this mysterious substance that's been left over from the ancients. It's far more powerful, except when it's used up, it's gone. It's not a renewable resource. And so there's only so many items in the world made of black steel. And our main character actually possesses one. He's what's called a bearer. He's actually been chosen by this black steel artifact to have it in his possession. The black steel, in this case, is actually intelligent, and it chooses who wields it in battle. So our main character is basically walking around with a magical weapon of mass destruction.
And it is it's a sword. What's the name of the sword again?
Ungruvidal.
I wanted you
which is actually kind of funny because this is one of those subconscious things that works on writers. Is there was actually a sword from a Viking saga by a very similar name, and I don't remember reading that when I was young, but it must have stuck in my head because that was always a cool name for a magic sword.
And this thing is inhabited by the memories and abilities of warriors who have held it before.
Yeah, basically in this case, it's been about 40 generations of bearers have wielded this sword in battle. And so all of their collected instincts and combat abilities get handed down with the sword to whoever holds it can draw upon that knowledge. And so basically, it's not just fighting this one person, it's fighting the 40 best fighters in the world that came before. So the guy wielding it is unstoppable killing machine, armed with something that can basically cut through anything with superhuman awareness and speed, and it's pretty cool. I have some fight scenes where regular people have to go up against him. It is just sad.
Well, let's talk about him. This is Ashok Vidal, who is he's this grim and implacable guy, but he's so grim and implacable that sometimes it's kind of funny how grim and implacable he is. And this is what makes it a Larry Correia book, by the way.
Yeah, I actually had a lot of fun with Ashok. So when you first meet Ashok, he's basically a guy that burns villages for a living, right? He is the guy they go to do all the hard stuff. And Ashok is dedicated to the law, utterly dedicated to the law. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but this is back in the first book. And what happens is Ashok discovers that all is not as it appears, and he is not who he has been raised to believe that he truly is. So, excuse me. So what happens is this is a guy who's totally devoted to the law. When he finds out that his existence is a violation of the law, it basically pushes him over the edge. I like to describe the character of Ashok as kind of a cross between George Washington and the Punisher and Judge Dredd, fantasy Judge Dredd. Ashok is this incredibly dedicated, incredibly lethal individual, and so he then basically is forced into betraying everything he's ever believed in, and he has to fight against the system that he helped build. So it's kind of a tragedy, but it's a journey. And that we get to go with Ashok as he goes from this unrelenting law enforcer to an actual human being who actually has to learn how to live and to deal with other people. And I love Ashok. He's a great character. Right? He's a lot of fun to write.
Well, he is. He's a good guy. He's gone over to the good guy side, and he doesn't like it, but he's sort of been forced into it by powers that be, ancient gods that begin to show up. Thera is another main character. We should talk about the series briefly. This is the third book in the series, but and it is sort of a culmination of one big storyline, which is the Ashok Devadus confrontation line. Let's talk about the bad guys then, so that we can bring in Devadus and the very evil Inquisitor Ormond. And who is he against? What is trying to keep him down? And what is the Great Extermination?
Well, okay, so in this world, we have the caste systems, right? And one of the groups is the lowest of the low is the casteless. These are people that legally aren't even considered people. And so what happens is there's a conspiracy afoot being perpetuated by this extremely dangerous individual named Ormond. And what he's doing is he has kind of this plot. I don't want to give too much away, but he has a behind-the-scenes deal to basically exterminate millions of people. He's trying to make it so that they'll have a casteless genocide and get rid of this entire group of people right out of society. And so as the story goes, he's actually using Ashok as a weapon to make people afraid of the casteless. And there's a rebellion. It's a story of rebellion. And as the story goes along, you discover what Ormond's plot is and why he's doing what he's doing. I don't like just mustache twirling villain. I like them to have a reason for what they do. And his reason does make sense. But he is evil. He is super evil. Now, the other guy that's basically one of Ashok's main opponents is a guy named Devadus. And he's also comes from the same organization that Ashok does. They grew up together. They were best friends. Devadus is a few years older, was always better at everything. But at the same time, Devadus has always been very, very jealous of Ashok and his abilities and the fact that he was chosen to carry this magical super weapon. Devadus feels like he has been basically betrayed by life, and that Ashok has taken all the glory that should be Devadus. So when Ashok becomes a rebel and a criminal, it falls on Devadus to hunt him down. And so for the last couple of books, we've had this struggle between these two men that were brothers, with this book finally having a showdown. I should probably specify real fast, this is book 3, but I've written all these so that if you just picked up Destroyer of Worlds and read it, you probably wouldn't be too lost. I try to write everything that I do as you can read one book and not be too confused. But the first book in the series is Son of the Black Sword. The second is House of Assassins, and the third is Destroyer of Worlds.
Let's, briefly maybe address the big thing you hear among high fantasy readers often is there's a certain subset who will only read a series after it's finished. But I think you could dive in on this one and read it. What are your thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, it's actually something that I write in several different genres. Like I said, I've done urban fantasy, thriller, sci-fi, alternate history, epic fantasy. And epic fantasy is actually the only one that I've heard this, where people don't want to start a series until it's finished. And what that comes down to is really there's two big, huge series out there that had great starts. They're very, very popular, but then they haven't finished. And it's been a lot of years from the last book, and that's Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss and Game of Thrones by George Martin. And both of those are extremely popular, huge followings, but no ending. And so that's frustrated a lot of fans. So unfortunately for all of us less famous epic fantasy authors out there still writing books, we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books into a series. People are, I'm not going to read it until you finish it. Well, the thing is, though, if you do that for a lot of these, don't worry, my sales are doing fine. I'm going to finish the series. But a lot of writers, the series won't get finished because there's no financial incentive for the publisher to keep publishing it. People don't read them. So a lot of fantasy fans are kind of stabbing themselves in the foot here by not jumping into epic fantasy series. And honestly, most of us produce still. I write for 12 years now. I've written 2 books a year. And so I think I'm on novel 24 or 25 right now. And so I have plans for 2 more or 3 more possibly in this series, and then I'll be done. But that's only basically every other year. So, but honestly, I think there's so many good epic fantasy authors working right now that if that's their attitude, that they're going to wait till the series is over, they're really missing out on all the high quality stuff. And that's kind of a bummer.
Well, let's talk about the sort of signature Correia thing for me is your amazing ability to write action and fights that don't just that they're just not bang pow, but that really have a structure to them. I mean, this thing in this book reminded me of the great fight from The Quiet Man. It just went on, and maybe talk a little bit about how you do that and the purpose for putting in all the fights, because they're not boring, they're fun, they're like the centerpieces of what you write.
Actually, it's kind of fun. I have a reputation of being an action writer, and that comes because I have a background in urban fantasy, which is very action oriented. And in fact, one of the best things I heard on a review for this series was, I really like this, but it's not plotted like most epic fantasies, and that stuff continually happens. And I took that as a great compliment. I have a background as an action writing guy. That's my favorite thing to write. I love writing action sequences. And I do my research. I try to make them fun. I try to make them always pertinent to the plot too, so that I don't just have action for the sake of action, but they're action sequences are the best time to have character development. It's the best time to learn things, best time to have big reveals. And so I am a huge fan of action sequences of books. I'm not a sword guy. And so when I started writing this epic fantasy series, I had to do a lot of research. I had to seek out people who knew what they were doing, and various types of sword experts and martial artists and modern sword fighting combat kind of thing. And I have those people check my action scenes to make sure that they make sense. And I think I've pulled it off, and had some really fun ones. We have a pretty epic battle sequence in this one, followed by probably one of the best sword fights I've ever written. I'm really proud of it. And between 2, very, very, very skilled individuals. And my background actually is firearms. And so when I was writing urban fantasy, the action sequences for that is easy. I don't have to do any research because that's stuff I just know. Or if I have a question for an expert, I just know them. I can just call them up and say, "Hey, man, how's this work? You invented it. How's this work?" But when I move into this world, I have to do a lot more work, and it's been a challenge. But I think I pulled it off, and I've really, really enjoyed it. And I hope you guys do too.
There's some really cool swords in here. So, there's action, there's character development. There's also romance in Destroyer of Worlds, and this is sort of it's something that's been building in the last couple of books with and it's very odd to see this man who just he, if anyone was made for a monastic life, it was Ashok Vidal. Kind of find love, or maybe find love in Destroyer of Worlds. Can you talk a little bit about Thera and
Sure.
that character arc that's been developing and
Yeah,
we find it at the beginning of the book, at least.
okay, so Thera is actually in the first book is when we first meet her, we know very little about her. All we know is that she's a criminal of some kind. She's a smuggler. And keep in mind, this is a world where the law is all consuming. So if you're a criminal at all, it's a death sentence. There's no mercy in this. And she's forced to work with Ashok. Only it turns out that who she actually is she's actually an extremely important person to the rebellion, and that she is who the ancient gods have chosen to speak through. And so she has been prophesizing the future and doing all these things. And she's been, keeping this on the down low. But Ashok is forced to protect her. And as the series goes on, they have to work together quite a bit. And this is a guy who basically has been devoted to nothing but his job, his entire career, or his entire life. And now all of a sudden there's this woman who she, in her way, is just as strong as he is. And she's kind of a reluctant leader. She did not want this. She was kind of thrust into this responsibility. She's got millions of people now looking to her for their survival. And so she's kind of this, they're both people who've been forced into roles that they didn't want. And that kind of brings them together over the series. And I get to have a little love story there and had a lot of fun. There is a fantastic character. She's a fighter, but she knows what she's good at. And once again, the combat in this, I try to keep it very realistic. And so that she's just a normal sized woman with normal physical skills. And so she fights through mostly subterfuge, guile, surprise. Oh no, please don't hurt me. I'm so sorry. She's awesome. And so having a chance to bring her and Ashok together over the series has been a lot of fun. They're two extremely broken people, but they're broken in a compatible manner, if that makes sense.
And she is the big thing that's going on here is that the old gods have been suppressed, and the casteless have a secret destiny that is slowly being revealed, and Thera is the leader of this rebellion. And so there's big stakes, right? I mean, this is for the world.
Oh yeah. This is basically the reason I don't give too much away, but the reason they're trying to kill all these people, millions of people, is because there's ancient prophecies as to their role in the world. And the reason that they're casteless is because they used to be one of the castes that was very important. They got overthrown, and there's this huge conspiracy against them. And so they've gotten the warrior caste together. They're going to go forth and they're going to execute all these people. And Ashok is one of the only things standing in their way. And now he's trying to organize these group of non-combatants and a lot of poor and sick people into an actual army to stand up against people that have fought their whole lives. And it was actually very complicated. And one thing I like about the series is I get to get into the politics, and that's one thing about epic fantasy that's fun is you got all the behind the scenes Machiavellian things, and we get to have a lot of fun with that. And so as the story goes on, it's basically the story of the rebellion, the casteless rebellion, standing up against the law, trying to make their own place, and in a world surrounded completely by demons. So
who are very hard to kill.
Oh yeah, they're ridiculous. But yeah, it's a great cast, huge cast of characters, a lot of supporting cast. I try to, everybody's there for a reason. I've got representatives from each of the casts, and so some of the favorite characters I've ever written of all my books are in this series. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it. It's a big fantasy, so there's a lot of other characters that one could mention. But let's talk about your process a little bit, since how people like to know these things. How do you write? How do you sit down, and what are you working on now?
Well, actually, I'm working on the next Monster Hunter novel right now. It's called Monster Hunter Bloodlines, and that's out summer 2021. And my process is, this is my office, and I have this kind of just great big uh, 1,100 square foot office. I treat it like a job. I get up in the morning, I go to work, I write till about dinner time, and I just do that every single day. Like I said, I do about 2 books a year consistently, and a whole bunch of short stories. I have 2 full short story collections out too, because I do a lot of short stories between every novel. I just finished a science fiction novel with a guy named John D. Brown. It's called Gun Runners. That'll be out in February. And so I just work. I don't take a lot of time off. I did this week because I have a cold. I've been mostly taking naps on the couch and playing video games. But yeah, that's my process. I try to write about 10,000 words a week, is what I shoot for. Obviously, when I'm editing, that goes down quite a bit, but about 2,500 words a day is what I shoot for during the week. I don't usually work weekends anymore. I find that it's good to take time off and, let my brain refresh. But that's my process. I still had a full-time job, and so I just wrote at night and weekends.
Yeah. And well, I happen to know, since I've known you for a while, that you started in a dank closet writing on the back of a door, that you so
yeah, we had a little tiny
changed.
house. We were poor. I had my first professional accounting job. Didn't pay very good. I had a little tiny unfinished basement, and so my office was one little unfinished concrete room in my basement. My desk was an old door on top of cinder blocks. It had cinder block legs. And I was writing my book down there because it was the only place I got privacy. We had little kids. And in the wintertime, it got so cold that I would actually put on a knit hat and a scarf. And I would type. I would wear gloves until it was time to type. And then I would type, and then I put my gloves back on. No, that's why I wrote my first novel. And I did that back in 2007, 2008. And it actually blew up huge. I still kept my day job for about the first 5 or 6 books, and before I went full-time writer, and I've been doing this ever since. And kind of living the dream now, and I love it. I love what I do. I have the coolest job in the world, and I have awesome fans. So I love it.
Well, what is next in this series? The Saga of the Forgotten Warrior.
Well, okay, so
Assuming Ashok survives.
Oh yeah, no spoilers. Okay, so when I originally pitched this to my publisher, Tony Weisskopf, I pitched it as a trilogy because I had the overall story arc in my head for the Castless Rebellion and the Uprising, and basically building a new country. And I pitched that to Tony, and she laughed at me, and she said, "There's no way you're going to fit that into 3 books. That's going to be 5 or 6." And then halfway through book 2, I had to admit she was right. So we're about halfway through the series right now. I have the next 2 outlined, and that should wrap it up theoretically, unless, considering what I could fit in there. I just have working titles for the next 2, nothing official yet.
Very cool. Well, the book is Destroyer of Worlds by Larry Correia. I think we're going to have time for audience questions, Stacy. Let's see. We had several. We talked about process a little bit. Maybe somebody asked if you had a military background.
No, I was medically unsuitable. No, but I was a military contractor for many years. But I say that, but I wasn't anything cool. I was an accountant. Okay, so when you say contractor, people think like cool guy door kicking stuff. No, I did spreadsheets for the Air Force and the Army.
Another question we have is, what is your biggest influence in writing the series? I'd be interested in hearing that.
Actually, that's a good one. Okay, so for this series, the single biggest, like I said, I listed off all these fantasy authors I'm fans of that I grew up on, but actually, the biggest single thing that I would say really inspires me is old school Robert E. Howard Conan, and also a little bit of Solomon Kane, if you know the character of Ashok. But yeah, actually, old school Robert E. Howard, I'd say that kind of throwback, tough, um, you know, hardcore, get business done kind of stuff.
We have a question about Monster Hunter International. If you are going to write more in the MHA world, but about different plots and characters.
Yeah. So the next one is going back to the main point of view character of Owen, Owen Pitt, and basically it's been kind of jumping around. Well, I'll write one from the main point of view character that continues the overall story arc, and then I'll go to one of the other main characters. So yes, I do plan on still jumping back and forth to other characters in the universe, and that will probably continue even after I wrap up the overall storyline. I could not, however, tell you what the next one is after Bloodlines yet. That's still kind of up. I got to finish the book first and see how it turns out.
You got to finish it. So another question is the same sort of thing about the world of Locke and Saga: The Forgotten Warrior. Do you see any other stories in this universe? I mean, you've written some short stories that are outside of Ashok's sort of point of view, but
Yeah, actually, I could. This is a world that's got a lot of potential. There's other development, and the funny thing is, there's other continents besides Locke that we only know of throughout because of history. We never actually see in the series. And I did do a short story about one of the supporting characters that came along long before um, the main characters. It's called The Testimony of the Traitor Ratul. It appears in my short story collection, Target Rich Environment. So yes, I could. I have nothing currently planned at this time. I'll finish up the main storyline, the Ashok storyline first, before I do anything else in Locke. But the world is actually really cool. It would make a really cool role playing game.
And you love role playing games, as I.
Yeah, I'm assuming all the thousands of minis on the wall behind me probably give that away.
You paint miniatures for relaxation, right? Is that?
Yeah, lots of. I pick up my webcam and show you guys, but it's probably be too hard to set back up.
Yeah. So we have another question, which is interesting. How did you end up publishing with Bane? How did the process go? Because I know that's a cool story.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting. So what happened was I self-published my very first novel, Monster Hunter International, and it did extremely good. And there was this bookstore in Minneapolis, Minnesota, called Uncle Hugo's. It's run by a guy named Don Bliley. It's one of the biggest independent bookstores in America. And Don was given the Word document file by one of his employees who was a fan of my early writing on the internet. And he showed it to Don, and Don was blown away. And he actually printed it off on the printer at work and took it home and read it all in one night. He sold a lot of Bane books. He contacted Tony Weisskopf at Bane and said, "You really need to buy this book because I could sell the heck out of it." Just a note, Don Bliley, his Uncle Hugo's bookstore got burned down recently during the riots in Minneapolis, which is just a tragedy because it's an amazing independent bookstore. And
been around for generations.
Been around since the 1970s. It was it's the store that launched my career, and I know I'm not alone. I know there's a lot of other authors that that store helped launch their careers too, and so that's a tragedy. But yeah, so actually, we sent Don a bunch of autographed copies of Destroyer of Worlds. So if anybody wants an autographed copy of Destroyer of the Worlds, just go to Uncle Hugo's website, and I think he's just shipping them out of his house right now. But yeah, that's how I met Tony from Bane was through them, and then Tony purchased Monster Hunter, and it blew up. And I've been there ever since.
Case of an author finding the audience out there for him. So can you talk some more about the Inquisitors? We have a question about their nature, and they're cool because they all wear masks for one thing.
Oh yeah, so they basically, so okay, in the Western world, we have Lady Justice is blindfolded with the scales. So it's all about fair. She's got a sword, the scales, It's all about, justice is weighing the two sides and like then coming to a unbiased decision, right? Not Locke. Locke, the face of the law, is this terrifying monster face with razor sharp teeth and squinty eyes and giant horns. Because in Locke, it's not about the law isn't about fairness. It isn't about justice. It is what it is, and it's terrifying. So the face of the law there is something you're scared of, and you obey out of fear. And so the Inquisitors all wear that over their face. They always have, at the minimum, they'll have like a cloth mask that has the law or like the demon face embroidered on it, or the teeth. But then their ceremonial masks are either wood or metal and like very ornate and terrifying. So that's been a symbol we've used on the covers of all the books so far. And then the protectors, which is what the Order Ashok's from. So the saying in the book is that the Inquisitors wear the law over their face, but the protectors wear it over their hearts, and they just have a medallion. So it's actually pretty cool.
It's this thing, right?
Yes, that thing.
That thing that's behind those swords.
That's law. It's not that's really justice in law.
Yeah. So that's and Ormon's wearing that thing and when he's talking to people.
Well, and then professionally speaking, since a lot of these guys are spies and assassins, it's because of their public personas, like always with their uniform. And so then when they need to go do their dirty business, all they have to do is take it off, and then they just look like a regular person and go do their business. So it's also pragmatic for a bunch of people that kill people silently, professionally.
They are an evil lot.
They're so
well developed. So here we have a question. Will we ever see the third installment of the War Machine Saga books? Which are for sale as ebooks, by the way, at Bane.
Yeah, that's a bummer right there. So that one is one that it's a little series of books I did on the side for Privateer Press. And I wrote a couple books for them, and I'm sure they'd love to have me do another one. But my problem is it's not from Bane. It's from this other little tiny publisher, and I was really proud of those, and I did those. But the problem is if I'm writing one of those, I'm not writing Monster Hunter. I'm not writing Grimnor. I'm not writing one of Son of the Black Sword. So I'm not writing one of my own universes. And so I sell a tiny fraction of those. Compared,
you have kids that are now in college, or at least one.
Yeah, I have 2 kids in college in a big house they're going to pay for. No, but the thing is, I love those. They're great books, and the ebooks are available on the Bane website, Into the Storm and Into the Wild. I'm really proud of those. They're very good books. I think they came out good. But my problem is, honestly, if I'm not writing in my own universe, there needs to be a really good reason. I have too many of my own universes I got to keep working on developing. And so it's really hard to take the time to write in other people's worlds.
Now, a viewer has been looking over your shoulder while you've been talking, and he said he sees and his name is Stan, so that's why I say he sees the leather Monster Hunter International, Vendetta, and Alpha. Do we do all of those in leather yet, or is that?
No, you did. Bane did the first 3 in leather, but not the rest of the series yet. And so, actually, that question I have no idea. That's out of my hands. That's a question for that's a question for Tony at Bane.
Tony Weiskopf. Yeah,
they sold out. They have sold out. And in fact, the ones on the internet that are available are going for scalpers prices. So they're especially the first one. They're really popular.
By the way, if you want to get that Destroyer of Worlds, there's still plenty of time. You go to Publishers Weekly /Correia to enter to get a signed copy of this beauty. Let's see. I think we have time for a couple of other questions. Let's see here. Let me look through them. Where do your ideas come from?
Oh gosh,
that's basically a bunch of questions we got. When did you start writing? What authors?
That's a funny. Okay, so I've actually written blog posts about that. Where do ideas come from? They're everywhere. Like heck, the only reason Son of the Black Sword existed was because of the song by Hans Zimmer. Painted a picture in my head. Honestly, ideas are literally everywhere, and as a writer, a lot of times we'll just file away ideas. And a lot of times I'll have an idea or a thought or just an image that'll strike me, or I'll see something and I'll just kind of file that away. And sometimes it'll be 5 or 6 years before I use that idea. And a lot of times it's because I got to wait for some other new ideas that mesh with it and click and turn into an actual story.
How do you develop, say, a cool idea that you have into a storyline? That's of interest, I think, to a lot of.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So basically, to get the kernel of a story, is you need several good ideas kind of stacked on each other, and then you got to figure out how it all goes together. A lot of people have the cool ideas, but they falter because they don't have like an outline of an actual story. They don't know where to go. And there's always the discussions of outliners versus pantsers, plotter versus pantser. So people who make it up as they go, and there are people who outline the whole thing. I'm an outliner usually, in that I will sit down, I'll take my good ideas, and I'll pick a very loose, like 1 or 2 page outline for a book, and I'll say, okay, this is the big things I want to happen. This is how we get from point A to point B to C to D, and then we're done. And so I usually do that first, but not always. Like the current Monster Hunter book was coming up pretty fast, the due date, and I was like, well, I don't have the full outline yet, so I better start writing, because writing takes longer. So I started writing all the stuff that I did know happened, and so I was like 50,000 words in, and they contacted me and said, hey, we need the plot synopsis. We can write the back cover blurb for the salespeople. And I was like, oh, well, I better hurry up and do that. But at that point, I was 50,000 words in. I knew exactly where I was going for the other, 80 or 100,000 words of the book that are still coming. But usually I'm an outliner, so usually I'll take those 5 or 6 good ideas and I'll just kind of go from there and get it all nailed down, and then just start writing. Writing is the hard part, though. A lot of people fail at the writing part, because that's the part where you sit in a chair for 6 months typing
And finish.
The finishing part is. My word of advice to aspiring writers is just finish it. Finish the book and then start the next one. Just keep going. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. And the more you produce, the more likely you are to create something that's actually going to be really good that people are going to want to read.
And here's another sort of process-related questions. Do you have a celebration ritual?
Oh, yes, I do, actually. And it's called the Song of Triumph. The song is Innis Mona by Alluviate, which is kind of a Celtic rock, heavy metal with bagpipes, and it's my Song of Triumph. And whenever I turn a book into the publisher, I play the Song of Triumph super loud in my office, and I post it on the internet. I'm like, Song of Triumph, and I listen to the Song of Triumph, and then once the Song of Triumph is played, I can go about my business. My kids have already said when I die, they're going to play that song at my funeral.
Maybe they'll play it as you enter Valhalla. We have another question about it sort of combines several questions, which is that this would make a great tabletop strategy game. The Lock, the World of Lock, and Ashok, and the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior.
That would be cool. And I've actually done some game-related stuff. And I've had some stuff, game stuff made of some of my worlds. I've done a couple of role-playing games now, and there is something coming that's under wraps I can't talk about for one of my worlds. And I'm always open. I'm open to everything. I've actually designed my own game, but I'm kind of postponing it because 2020 sucks before I launch that. But yeah, no, I'm always open to various companies, and people have approached me about doing different properties or different games set in my worlds, and I'm always open to that. Just depends on who it is and what they want to do.
Well, I think that was the last question. So he is Larry Correia, and the book is Destroyer of Worlds, book 3 in the Saga of the Forgotten Warriors, and we can throw it back to Stacy now, I believe.
Hi. Okay. So this is your last chance to win a copy of Destroyer of Worlds. Go to publishersweekly.com/Correia. That's CORREIA. The next Books on Top live event is next Wednesday, September 30th, with celebrated fat acceptance advocate and award-winning blogger Stephanie Yeboah. She'll be discussing her debut book, Fattily Ever After. Sign up to receive a reminder of the event at publishersweekly.com/booksontop live. Hope you can join us then.